They didn't just tow my boat. They dragged 30 years of service, my wife's last letters, and the only place I ever learned how to be alone without breaking off my dock at 2:47 in the morning. To them, it was an eyesore. To me, it was a Navy patrol vessel that still carried the weight of men who never made it home. And when the HOA president smiled and told me it was community business, I realized some people have no idea what kind of line they're crossing until it snaps back. I didn't come to this lake looking for trouble. After nearly 3 decades in the Navy, trouble was the one thing I was finally done chasing. I wanted quiet. I wanted water instead of concrete pine trees, instead of sirens, and a place where I could breathe without feeling like the walls were closing in. My wife Ellen had been gone 3 years by then. Cancer doesn't announce itself with explosions or drama. It just takes up space slowly until there's nothing left to argue with. Our son had shipped out to Marine boot camp not long after the funeral, and the house we'd shared for 20 years felt wrong overnight, too big, too full of echoes. Every room smelled like her soap. Every drawer still held something she'd meant to finish. I couldn't stay there. So I drove north until the air changed and the roads narrowed, and I found this little HOA-run lakeside community that promised tranquility and order. I laughed at the brochure back then. After the Navy, I figured I could live with a few rules. The house itself was nothing special. One-story weathered cedar siding, a narrow porch that creaked when you walked on it. But the lot ran straight down to the water, and at the end of it was a private pier. Mine. That pier was the deal, because tied up there rocking gently in the slip like an old dog who'd earned her rest was my boat. Officially, she was still federal property, a decommissioned Navy patrol vessel under a preservation and custodianship program. Unofficially, she was my refuge. A 32-foot gray hull that had carried me through fog fire and the kind of nights where the radio went quiet and you learned real fast how much silence could weigh. I'd stood at her helm when I got the call that Ellen's cancer was back. I'd read my son's first letter from boot camp there, the ink smudged where he'd tried not to cry. Every scar on her hull meant something. Every bolt held a memory. I kept her immaculate not because anyone made me, but because some things deserve respect. For the first year, no one bothered me. Neighbors waved from golf carts. The HOA sent a glossy welcome packet. I paid my dues on time, mowed my lawn on Saturdays, nodded politely at community cookouts. In the evenings, I'd sit aboard the boat with my feet up, listening to the water slap gently against the hull, sometimes talking out loud to Ellen like she was still there. The stars over the lake were bright enough that I could almost believe she heard me. I thought I'd found peace. Then one spring morning, I noticed her standing at the edge of my lawn. Tall, rigid posture, bleach-blonde bob cut so sharp it looked like it could draw a blood-red blazer that screamed authority. She held a leather-bound notepad like a weapon. Mr. Jensen, she called, voice clipped and efficient. I'm Karen Whitmore, newly elected president of the Lakeside Preserve Homeowners Association. She didn't wait for an invitation before stepping onto my pier. Her eyes moved over the boat the way an inspector looks at a crack in the wall. She's large, she said finally, and the color scheme doesn't exactly blend with our natural aesthetic. I told her calmly what the boat was, who owned it, and why it was there. I offered to show her the paperwork. Federal registration, custodianship contract, letters signed by people whose titles actually meant something. She smiled in that tight way that never reaches the eyes. I'm sure you have documentation, she said, jotting something down. But we've received concerns. Some residents find the military appearance intimidating. We strive for tranquility here. Tranquility. The word landed wrong. I looked at the flag snapping gently at the stern and felt something cold settle in my chest. She's a memorial, I said, and she's protected. She's not hurting anyone. Karen closed her notebook. For now, she replied, but guidelines are guidelines. I'll bring this to the board. Expect correspondence. The correspondence came fast. Letters about size restrictions, color palettes, vague phrases like visual harmony and property values. newsletters with highlighted sections about non-conforming watercraft. Her white SUV started making slow passes by my house, pausing just long enough for her to stare down toward the pier. I responded the only way I knew how, calmly, thoroughly, in writing. I photocopied everything, sent polite letters explaining that the boat was outside HOA jurisdiction. For 10 days there was silence. I let myself hope. That was my mistake. The first time they tried to tow the boat, it was in broad daylight. I came home from the hardware store and found 2 men chaining a flatbed trailer to my pier. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I told them exactly what they were touching and what it would mean if they kept going. The older one took one look at the paperwork I handed him and shook his head. "Not worth it," he said, and they left. I thought that would be the end of it. I installed lights and a small camera anyway. Old habits die hard. 2 weeks later at 2:47 in the morning, the floodlights snapped on. Headlights crept down my driveway low and careful. A flatbed with its logo taped over. 2 men moved fast and practiced. And there she was again, standing on my lawn in that red blazer, arms folded, watching. By the time I got down the slope, the winch was screaming. Steel cable bit into teak. The hull groaned as it was dragged sideways. I shouted until my voice cracked, told them they were committing a felony. Karen looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "This is a lawful removal," she said. "Emergency authority." The cable tightened. Sparks flew. I started filming with my phone, narrating dates and times, hands shaking with a kind of fury I hadn't felt since combat. Karen stepped into the frame, blocking the lens. "This is private association business," she snapped. Then the driver hesitated. Finally, he killed the winch. They unhooked and pulled away, leaving gouges in the pier and a raw stripe along the hull. I stood there in the dark, breathing hard, heart pounding, thinking that maybe it was over. I was wrong. When the sun came up, the slip was empty. The boat was gone. Oil slicked the water where she'd been dragged. Shredded lines floated like dead snakes. I don't remember sitting down, but I remember staring at that empty space until it felt like something had been ripped out of my chest. By noon, the first fine arrived. Then another. They billed me for towing fees, for unauthorized military storage, for obstruction. Karen's handwriting was neat, almost kind, like she was doing me a favor. Neighbors stopped waving. People crossed the street when they saw me. Anonymous complaints brought fire inspectors to my door. Someone spray-painted "unsafe" on my curb. I sat at my kitchen table one night, letters from Ellen spread out in front of me, and I did something I hadn't done in years. I doubted myself. I wondered if I was wrong, if keeping the boat was selfish, if maybe I should just let it go, sell it, walk away, make the noise stop. I was tired, bone tired. There are moments when even stubborn men start to think surrender might feel like relief. What stopped me wasn't anger. It was memory. I opened one of Ellen's letters, the one she wrote when the doctors had stopped pretending. "Keep her safe for me," she'd written. "She'll bring you home when I can't." Sitting there with fines piling up and the lake feeling hostile instead of healing, I realized letting the HOA win wouldn't just mean losing a boat. It would mean admitting that someone with a clipboard and a blazer could erase a life lived honestly. That wasn't something I could live with, so I made the call. One email sent with the same precision I'd used for after-action reports. Unauthorized seizure of federally protected naval vessel. Attachments included. Video footage, timestamps, names. Within hours, my phone rang. Naval Legal Services, then NCIS. They didn't ask if the boat was important to me. They already knew what it meant. "Do not pay any fines," they told me. "Do not engage. We're taking this." Things moved fast after that. Federal agents at my pier photographing damage like it was a crime scene, because it was. They found the boat in a fenced salvage lot 40 miles away, stripped of electronics parts already listed online. Ellen's letters gone. The brass plaque with my crew's names ripped off. Hearing that broke something in me, but it also hardened something else. When they recovered the letters from a plastic bin, stained but intact, I had to sit down. Grown men don't cry much in my line of work, but I came close. Karen's authority evaporated overnight. Cease and desist orders, investigations, emergency HOA meetings where residents finally started asking the questions they'd been too afraid to ask before. She didn't show her face. By the time the boat was loaded onto a government trailer and taken to a Navy yard for restoration, Karen Whitmore had resigned and put her house on the market. She left town quietly, like people always do when the paper shields they hide behind finally burn away. The day the boat came home, there were no sirens, no speeches, just a flatbed rolling slowly down my driveway, the hull gleaming, the flag snapping clean in the wind. Neighbors gathered along the shore, some of them saluting, some of them crying. I stepped aboard alone. I ran my hand along the rail where the cable had bitten and been repaired. I placed Ellen's letters back in the drawer beneath the helm. The lake felt whole again, but I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. The HOA folded into itself soon after. New leadership, quiet apologies, fines erased. Karen was gone, and with her went the fear that had kept everyone else in line. When the investigation wrapped, there was no dramatic ending, no victory lap. Just silence. The good kind. Here's what I learned. Rules don't make a community. Power doesn't make someone right. And when people use authority to bully instead of protect, eventually they'll push the wrong person too far.